And welcome to episode 3 of the JNC Broadcasters podcast. That name is still cringeworthy, but we're working on it, right?
Only episode 3.
Oh yeah, episode 3, we're getting there. I'm Jared DeGatano.
I'm Carter Daly.
And today, before we start, big news, drum roll. We have our very own Instagram page. Yes, you don't have to keep waiting for one of us to post it on social media. You can actually follow our very own Instagram page. It is JC_broadcasters. It's got word sports written in it and black lettering as our logo, just plain and simple, because that's the way I think we like to keep it here on the podcast. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we're just chill guys. Just love talking about sports. That's us.
Keeping it nice and simple, giving us our Memphis perspective when it comes to most things Memphis sports. And I think the big news in Memphis sports this week was the draft. And it was interesting.
Yeah.
We moved up. We knew that early in the week. We discussed that on Monday about how we thought that was a good trade. And we went to 10, and I was watching the draft at home and kind of saw the way the picks were coming off the board. Giddey went 6. Wagner went what, 8 or 9. And I was thinking to myself, man, this is falling exactly the way I thought it was going to go. I thought Memphis was going to go Moses Moody out of Arkansas, get that shooting kind of 3-and-D guy to complement Dylan Brooks. And they didn't. They went and they picked Zaire Williams. I'm going to let you start. What do you think about that pick?
It surprised me because I felt like they had someone in mind. Usually when you trade up in the draft, like top 10 pick, you would hope that your team has someone in mind that they're going after. But it kind of felt like I thought, like, out of all the options they had, like James Bouknight and Moses Moody, I thought, like, hey, one of these guys are going to be NBA ready. But they went the complete opposite with a raw prospect. And I don't think he's obviously not bad, and he has a lot of talent. But with the way our team already is, with much talent and not much experience at all, I don't know if that's what we want right now. I'm not that upset. I know a lot of Memphis fans are upset, but I think overall it's still an exciting prospect to have on your team.
I would agree with that. I think it was very interesting to see. I remember watching the draft, and you kind of knew who the first 4 picks were going to be, and then after that, to see Kuminga go 7 and then Wagner to go 8, I was thinking, oh yeah, if we can get past the Sacramento pick, we're going to get either Moody or Bouknight, and it's just pick your choice. And then when they went with Devon Mitchell, I was like, yeah, it's either one. And they went to Zaire. And it's funny, I said this earlier, and I actually heard Jason Smith on 92.9 ESPN talk about this the other day. You've gotten to the point with this Memphis Grizzlies front office to where everything they've done has been really good, so you're almost like giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And you kind of could have talked yourself into pretty much anybody that they would have picked. And so my opinion was when they first picked him, I was like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? I threw my hands up. I was frustrated because I was like, Moody and Bouknight are still right there. Those are the guys you want to go to. Like, I thought, we talked about this earlier. I had an entire offensive scheme drawn out in my head due to my coaching background for what it would look like if Moses Moody was on the floor with Ja, with Dylan, with Jaren, and with Steven Adams. And it sounded, if you can agree, I thought it sounded really nice as an offense and really worked, and it played to everybody's strength, including Moses Moody's. And for them to go Zaire Williams, I was frustrated. I threw my hands up. But as I started to think about it more and start to look deeper into Zaire as the prospect, I saw why they went there. You move up to 10 because you're not trying to get that steady, solid piece that you think is going to contribute. And the way I said it was, that's why you didn't pick Wagner, even if he was available there, because at 10, especially when you move up and you give up a piece like Jonas, you're not looking for the highest he can be is here and the lowest he can be is here, right? That little barely any like differential player, the mid-ceiling, mid-floor kind of player, you're looking for the high ceiling, but you're taking the risk with the high floor, that high risk, high reward kind of thing. And I think that's what the Grizzlies went here when they picked Williams. They moved up because they don't see him as the guy, the freshman that struggled at Stanford. They see him as that top 5 prospect coming out of high school. And at 6'10", he's really big to play that small forward position, but he's got good enough ball handling. ESPN has him listed as a shooting guard. I see him sliding in at the 3 and letting Dylan stay as the 2 guard. But with that height, I think it's going to help bring more switchability among that defense, because that allows you to switch, pretty much anybody but, I would say, Steven Adams, 1 through 4, defensively. Hopefully he can find the shot. Jay Billis said it last night. His shooting numbers at Stanford really didn't reflect how good of a shooter he is. And if you watch his highlight film, he's actually got a pretty good stroke. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I do think it's going to be one where it takes a year or two for him to finally click. But if he can click, I think it's going to work really well, especially with how big and tall he is and how athletic he is. Interview that when they were talking about what he thought about going to Memphis.
Yeah, and talking about Ja. And I know what I liked about it the most was like the respect he had for Ja already, and you love to see that from young prospects. How Memphis is a good spot to be. I mean, I remember years ago when we were rebuilding, and Mo Bamba said he didn't even want to work out with Memphis.
Yeah,
because he doesn't want to go to Memphis, and I feel like we're getting to the level of respect that all fans should be excited for.
Mm-hmm.
And when young prospects like that are excited to go to your team, then it gives you a lot of pride for Memphis.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things too is when you draft that high, you think those players are the kind of guys that are looking to say, oh yeah, I'm stepping in, I'm definitely the number 1 or I'm the number 2 guy. And by him saying pretty much, if Ja throws it up there, I'll go get it, right? Saying Ja's going to be great, Ja's that. He understands, and I think that's shows high IQ that he's willing to say, I'm not going to step in and be the immediate help. I'm not going to be that immediate guy that's going to step in and be the go-to guy. I understand that. I have a place in the pecking order, and I understand that it's not towards the top, it's towards that middle range, and I'm going to have to work to prove my worth. And I think that's the kind of player that really fits our identity well. Someone that is kind of undervalued by everybody else is taken to Memphis, and Memphis is like, you got to prove yourself, and he's willing to do that. And so I'm excited to see. I think it was an interesting draft. It hurt at first. I think one team that really did well in the draft was the Warriors.
I'm gonna take you back real quick. I want to go back to the pick. I know you went in on Zaire and talking about the benefit of the doubt for this front office, because this front office has done an excellent job rebuilding this team, and I do believe in them. However, this pick, I will say, is not like the others. Ja Morant, obvious pick. Jaren, I'd say, was quite obvious, right, at the time. When Brandon Clark was drafted, everyone knew, like, hey, that's the steal of the draft. Everyone knew Desmond Bane, for where we drafted him, his value, he was going to be great.
And he was going to fit the scheme really well.
Yeah. Zaire, when we took Zaire, the fans are kind of like, I don't know about this. And I saw that a lot, and I mean, it's different. So I don't have as much belief. And, I mean, I'm going to for the time, because from what this front office has done, I'm just going to have to blindly trust them, because, like Zaire, he did have great tape, but so does every player in this draft.
The way I felt about it first, kind of viewed that, it was along the lines for me was, that's a good pick, but there was better options at 10. But I feel like with Zaire, you get a higher ceiling than you do if you get Moses Moody or, James Bouknight. And so that was that home run swing, and you knew it had to come eventually, and you didn't think you thought maybe it might happen at 10, but it won't be one. You thought if they're going to take a home run swing, they're going to trade up to get it. But they took this. I mean, it is a huge home run swing to get Zaire Williams at 10, because even after, out of high school, they were like, oh, he's a top 5 pick. And then he struggled at Stanford, and he was projected really low. So you are taking the huge swing here, and it might hit, it might not. The good news is I feel like you've stockpiled enough future picks, and you have enough depth to where if it doesn't hit, it's not catastrophic to your rebuild. And then after that, I was kind of tuned out in the draft. I kind of had it going on in the background. Watched some really good picks, especially towards the mid-20s range, kind of waiting for us to get back around to the second round, for us to trade into the first round. And before we talk about who we picked, let's talk about what we gave up. So we gave up pick 40, and we gave up 2 future second-round picks to Utah to move to pick 30. How do you like that trade? How would you grade that trade? Don't take the play, just the picks in general.
I think we lost on pick-wise. We lost on value, but again, it goes back to giving the front office the benefit of the doubt with who they chose and who they selected. They just had such a great belief in who was still available that they were willing to give up that much. Value-wise, we lost, but I really liked what I saw from this player on tape, and I think he is underrated. So it really just comes out to, how he plays, and it was definitely a position of need. So I don't think it's anything to be upset about.
I would argue that. I think it was, with how many first-round picks you have saved up, you were kind of willing to give up a few future second-round picks. You didn't risk a lot of draft capital to move up 10 spots. Maybe you find, I'm gonna butcher his name, so I'm gonna apologize. Santi Aldama, I think I said that right.
That's right.
To move up, and you are right. I think he does slide in very, very well as a backup center, in my opinion, with him being 6'11". He's got good shooting ability, and he really does a good job of rebounding, and he does a good job of passing the ball. So I kind of like that. He shot 37% from three, which I think really shows you that he's able to step out. And I think it's one of those picks where it might take a year or two for him to get it. But if he's able to get, especially that shot, I think he'd fit really well with this offense, considering his height and his rebounding ability. One of the big things that they said he would struggle with is he gets kind of his lack of speed and his defensive, because he just kind of gets they call it big man flat foot, that big man feet, where he gets kind of slow with his feet. That's one of the most important things when it comes to basketball, especially defense, is how quick can you move your feet? How quick can you change direction? That's why guys like De'Aaron Fox are so highly valued, because they are able to do that. So he gets kind of like slow-stepped, and that's going to be something that he's going to have to work on. And I think with him having Steven Adams as his, like, we can almost consider Steven his mentor when it comes to the defensive side of things, I think that's going to help, because Steven's not like this light-footed person either, but yet he's still considered such a good defender because he's able to move quickly. His passing skills, did you see a lot of his passing skills on tape?
Yes, I did see his passing skills. He's a great guy. I didn't take too much of the tape into account, mostly because the competition was so weak. Because he averaged 20 and 10 last year, and when you turn on the tape, it was extremely impressive. But you can only take it with a grain of salt, with obviously, playing such weak competition. But he comes from a background where he was the European Under-18 MVP, and he had connections to go play for whatever Loyola school it was, Maryland.
Loyola, Maryland,
where he had connections there. So I think if he was at a bigger school, I think he would have been drafted higher, because talent-wise, this guy looks amazing. Of course, like, a player from Loyola, Maryland isn't gonna get too many looks, because why are you at Loyola, Maryland in the first place? But there's a lot to be excited about him.
So
who he reminds me of the most, if I were to compare him to anyone? Jaren Jackson.
I can see that. Big, tall guy, can shoot really well.
Not as fast.
But
skill-wise, yes.
I'm interested in what happens, because one of the big things that they talked about was he had this desire to return to, like, a professional career in Spain to work on that stuff. So I don't know. Like, that might be one of those guys you draft and you don't get him for 2 or 3 years. That'd be interesting to see. I hope he does join the team, because I think, like I said, I think he could fit in really well behind Steven. And I think he'd be really, really good for that bench group too, especially if you decide to move on from Clark or Tillman, to have him on that group with, and let's say you start Zaire Williams just for fun. You have Kyle to kind of help him defensively. That would be a fun group to watch. That's a lot of height, especially if you go something like Melton, Desmond Bain, Kyle, let's say Brandon Clark, and then this guy. That shows, I think that's a very, not defensive oriented, but a pretty good shooting group, and it also allows you to switch a lot. So that would be interesting to see. I hope he joins the team. I really does. I understand the competition thing, but some things you can do even without the competition. Like Loyola asked him to push the ball more off defensive rebounds. That'd be fun to see, especially in open floor if he can get going with that starters group, which might not take, but that might take a year or two to get to. But if you could see him pushing the ball and just to have the ability for him, Jaren, Zaire, Dylan, and Ja to push the ball, that would just speed it up. And I think Ja's at his best when the game's sped up and just in open floor, because
100%.
when the game's sped up for a lot of people, they start to get flustered and they start to create more turnovers and they start to, they're not as controlled. I think Ja, even when the game's sped up, he's still completely fine. So having him that was an interesting pick to see. I remember pulling it up right as it happened too. I don't think we gave up a lot. I understand that you think we did, but I think those future first are really going to be what's important. I still don't think they're done. I think for draft pick wise, I think these two are going to stay. But there's still so much depth on this bench and so many future first round picks that I don't think you're sitting now. Now you're looking out and you're saying, all right, Russ is going to LA. Where can we go to get better? It's that conversation we had Monday. What depth pieces can we package together to go get talent? And, I'm interested to see. I think, knock on wood, I think Bradley Beal might be an option out there.
Could be.
Because, Washington, they're selling. They are so in sell mode, especially after they gave up Russell Westbrook. They're looking to stockpile, and maybe you send them, a Grayson Allen and 2 first-round picks, and you go get Bradley Beal to help your shooting while you develop Zaire on your bench. So it would be interesting to see. I think yesterday was very, very interesting to watch. I was upset at first, but I kind of, like I said, I talked myself into these 2 picks.
Yeah, definitely. And there has been a lot of talk about Santi becoming like a draft and stash player, which I don't think would be the end of the world. Like, obviously we aren't contending right now, and we aren't obviously we need a center, some center depth, and Steven Adams and Xavier Tillman isn't all that much to be excited for. But at the end of the day,
don't hate on my boy Steven Adams now.
I won't. But in about 2-3 years, when those first round draft picks are used up, and we're hoping to start contending, that's when we want him to be his best. And so, I don't think there's too much pressure on us right now. And I think, looking back on it, the raw talent picks, at the end of the day, it's the right pick because we're not looking to win right now.
It is. And so my question to you is this: if you're thinking about a draft and stash kind of thing, if you're the Grizzlies front office, do you want to draft and stash, or would you rather have him now?
Draft and stash.
Why?
Mainly because we have so much depth already, and we really need to start clearing out.
But see, I would argue, I think you need to have him now. Like, I understand it's better for you long term, but his biggest hole in his game right now is his defense. And you've got one of the better defensive centers in the league as your projected starter. And it would just be so much better to have Steven in his ear on a daily basis. Like, if you want, it's almost like one of the things that I heard about when we were looking to draft, when we drafted Jaren, was he needs to be in Mark's ear on a daily basis. Mark needs to be with him everywhere he goes to learn how to be a playmaking big man. I think it's the same thing here for him when it comes to, he needs to be with Steven Adams just to learn that defensively. Because I'd rather be willing to give up a year or 2 of his contract for him to get better defensively but not produce as a starter, produce as a bench player. Then when Steven leaves, we bring him finally in and he's still the same heavy-footed defensive player struggling defensively that he is now.
I just think, and you made all good points, I just think I'd rather him playing somewhere rather than sitting on our bench out of the rotation.
So would you think I think it really depends on what you do with this offseason. Like, if you end up saying we're going to stick with Tillman, we're going to stick with Clark, we're going to, you're going to get a log jam, especially with Zaire moving to a 3 position. You might think Kyle might move to the 4 on the bench, which that would create a log jam at power forward and center. So that could be interesting to see. I don't know. if you make more moves this offseason and you give away a few pieces, then I could see him being part of the team. If not, I could understand why you draft and stash him. But overall, I think it was a. Let me ask you this: what do you think give the Grizzlies draft a grade? What would you give it?
I would give it a B-.
I was thinking the same thing. Why? Let me ask you why you think it's a B-.
Why? It's because the talent is there, but it's not guaranteed. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's not and the picks weren't good enough to say like, hey, this is an A. It's all dependent on the future. So to give this I would say the A range is where it's like, hey, this guy is expected to be so and so. Our guys we don't know enough about yet, and so I think that's why and it was an unexpected pick as well. So
I think
it's too much risk.
I would say B-, and then when you ask me this question again in 5 years, I'll either say A or F because there's no middle ground here.
Yeah.
Zaire either hits or he doesn't. If he doesn't hit, you move on. If Aldama doesn't hit, you move on. If he hits, awesome. Like you said, this is 2 uncertainty draft picks, and you're getting the high risk, high reward kind of thing here. If you hit, great. You picked up 2 really, really good, maybe even game-changing players for your rotation, but you won't know this year. It'll take you 2 or 3 years to do it. So, final question before we go. Drafts happened. Where do you like the Grizzlies roster now better or worse than you did pre-draft?
I would say, I think obviously better. I think it's hard to say you haven't gotten better when you add some talent to it. I think maybe I would have enjoyed it a bit better if we could have moved on from a few players and maybe add a few draft picks, and that's not the roster itself. I think we could have done better in our situation. I think we should have made another trade or two.
Do you think we should have moved up?
I think definitely with Kuminga falling at 7, I think there was definitely, and Giddey being taken early, and then
I'm so happy he was picked at 6.
And then Moody falling even more. Like, I think there were opportunities.
I think that's a
there.
big tell that he fell.
I know it is,
and we'll talk about that more on Monday.
It was a bit. There were a lot of opportunities with Scotty Barnes being taken early. Obviously, the top 6 talents for falling back.
If it was me, I think the minute Scotty Barnes was taken at 4, you're calling Orlando and saying, "What does it take to get Jalen Suggs?" Because I think he would have fit in so well with Ja. But you thought he was going 4, and I think the difference between 4 and 5 would have made a huge difference. But that's all in the past. Can't change it. I agree. I think the roster you're a little more excited for the roster. It adds a whole new cloud of mystery, especially since you picked in the first round twice. If you understand it's a second round pick, you're thinking, oh well, he's not. Maybe he's the back half, if at all, rotation. Kind of like that Jonte Porter thing. RIP his career. But now that he's a first round pick, you're expecting him to play. And so it adds a whole new shroud of mystery to the offseason.
I will say, yes, he's a first-round pick who's expected to play, but we also understand that he's a raw talent. So it's like you don't expect him to be great right away. And that's what I like about it.
And I know. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think now you just pick and, you've got probably 10 to 12 players that you can kind of just pick and choose from. Who do we pick in the future? Plus all those, what do we have now? 5 first-round picks in the next 2 years? So we're in a good position. Now it's just a matter of figuring it out. You've got the assets now. You just got to figure it out as a group. I think this was fun. This was a pretty good podcast. As always, hit us up on Instagram at JC_broadcasters. Give us your comments, what you like, what you didn't like. We're always open to feedback. That's kind of why we started the Instagram in the first place. Other than that, I think Monday we'll do winners and losers of the draft.
That sounds good.
We might touch up on the trade deadline a little bit for baseball. That was interesting to see today.
Oh, yeah.
Big moves, especially out west and for the Yankees, but they'll always be buying. But we'll talk about more of that on Monday. Until then, I'm Jared DeGatano.
And I'm Carter Dealey.
And this is the J&C Broadcasters Podcast. Have a great weekend, guys.